You ever sit there in your own home staring at the one person you trusted most in the world and realize she's been sharpening the knife the whole time? Not in some dramatic movie way, but in that quiet, calculated, everyday kind of way that makes your stomach drop because it feels so normal until it doesn't. That's exactly how it started for me. My name is Sophia Reynolds. I'm 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my best friend Vanessa Hale walked into my Lakeside Manor on Lake Washington with my boyfriend Ethan Caldwell right behind her, slapped a stack of legal papers on my marble island, and announced that she and Ethan were now majority stakeholders in the company I built from absolute scratch. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just took a slow sip of the iced coffee I'd been nursing and looked her dead in the eye while my brain did that thing where it tries to convince you this is some elaborate prank. It wasn't. And the worst part I could see in her face, that she'd rehearsed this moment for months. Let me tell you something about karma, though. Sometimes it doesn't come in with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it just sits back, lets people sign their own names on the dotted line, and watches the whole thing unravel in real time. If you've ever had someone you called family try to gut you financially while smiling like they're doing you a favor, drop a comment below and let me know I'm not alone in this mess. Hit that like button if you've ever had to smile through a betrayal so cold it made your blood feel like it was actually freezing in your veins. I built Lakeview Lux Designs 8 years ago in a cramped studio apartment in Capitol Hill with nothing but a secondhand laptop, a stack of fabric swatches, and a dream that rich Seattle clients would actually pay for sustainable, high-end home staging and renovation work that didn't look like every other beige McMansion flip. Fast forward to now, and we're talking seven-figure contracts, celebrity lake houses, and a waiting list so long I had to hire a full-time assistant just to manage the inquiries. The historic estate I live in on Lake Washington bought it outright 2 years ago after the first big corporate client paid in full. It's not flashy in that new money way. It's old Seattle money mixed with my own sweat, all dark wood beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, and that quiet kind of luxury that makes you feel like you finally made it. Or at least I did, until Vanessa decided my success looked better, split 3 ways. She and Ethan had shown up unannounced that gray Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the lake looks like hammered steel and the rain is more mist than actual drops. I'd been reviewing final renderings for a Medina waterfront project when Claire Montgomery, my assistant, buzzed the gate and said Vanessa was outside with Ethan and it looked important. I told her to let them in. Big mistake. Huge. Vanessa breezed into the open concept kitchen like she owned the place, which according to the papers she dropped on the island, she now partially did. Ethan hung back by the windows, arms crossed, looking every bit the supportive boyfriend who'd suddenly decided loyalty was negotiable. Sophia, babe, before you freak out, just hear us out. Vanessa started her voice that same honeyed tone she'd used since we were 22 and sharing cheap wine in my old apartment. She flipped open the manila folder with a flourish. These are the original incorporation documents from when I helped you file everything back in the beginning. Remember how stressed you were about the LLC paperwork I co-signed as a founding partner because you needed someone with a clean credit history? It's all right here in black and white. I set my coffee down so slowly it felt like the room had slowed with me. Sarcastic little laugh escaped before I could stop it. Oh, that's rich, Vanessa. You helped me file. You mean you sat on my couch scrolling Instagram while I paid the lawyer and did all the actual work? My tone was measured, almost conversational, but the bitterness was already seeping through like ink and water. I could feel it coating every word. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't jump in to defend me. Of course he didn't. He'd been unusually quiet the last few weeks, canceling plans, taking mysterious calls in the other room. Now it made sense. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Vanessa's shoulder like they were a united front. Look, the company's valuation is through the roof. We're not trying to take it from you. We just want what's fair. Vanessa's been there since day one. She deserves equity. Fair. The word tasted like spoiled milk in my mouth. I scanned the top page of the documents. It was all legalese, but the signatures were unmistakable. My name from 8 years ago when I was broke and desperate and thought Vanessa was my ride or die. Hers was right next to it, listed as co founder with a 40% stake that somehow no one had ever mentioned again until today. Old lies neatly typed and notarized, waiting like a landmine. I leaned against the island, crossing my arms to keep my hands from shaking. So let me get this straight. You two drove all the way out here to my house, the one I paid for with money I earned while you were still figuring out your influencer phase. Vanessa, to tell me you're claiming almost half my company because of paperwork I trusted you with when I was 23. The sarcasm dripped heavier now. How thoughtful. Really warms the heart. Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes had that hard glint I'd only seen when she was negotiating with vendors for her own failed side hustle a few years back. Don't make this ugly, Sophia. We're family. Or at least I thought we were. Ethan and I have been talking, and with the new contracts coming in, it just makes sense to formalize things. You've always been the creative one. We can handle the business side. Ethan nodded like this was the most reasonable conversation in the world. Babe, you hate the financial stuff anyway. Let us take some of the load off. I wanted to laugh in their faces. Instead, I picked up the folder and flipped through a few more pages, my mind already racing through every conversation we'd ever had about the company. Vanessa had never once asked for credit. She'd complained about how much time I spent working, rolled her eyes when I turned down girls' trips because of deadlines, and now suddenly she was a founding partner. The bitterness rose like bile, but I kept my voice steady, strategic. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me lose it in my own kitchen. Claire had hovered near the hallway entrance, pretending to organize mail, but clearly listening. I caught her eye and gave the tiniest head shake. Not yet. Natalie Brooks, my corporate lawyer, who'd become more friend than advisor over the last 2 years, was already on speed dial in my head. But first, I needed to hear them say it all out loud. Vanessa leaned in, lowering her voice like we were still those broke girls sharing secrets. Look, the papers are already filed with the state. It's done. We just need your signature on the operating agreement update to make it official and avoid any messy disputes. Think of it as protecting what we built together. What we built. The phrase made my jaw tighten so hard I thought I might crack a tooth. I set the folder down and looked straight at her, letting the sarcasm coat every syllable. Protecting what we built? That's cute, Vanessa. Real touching. Tell me, does we include the nights I slept on the floor of that studio because I couldn't afford rent after paying for materials while you were out partying with your latest flavor of the month, or the investor meetings I took alone because you said networking made you anxious? Ethan tried to cut in. Sophia, come on, don't do this. I turned the bitterness on him next, sweet as poisoned honey. Oh, Ethan, honey, you've been so supportive lately. All those late nights you said you were working on your consulting gig. Was that code for helping Vanessa dig up these dusty old documents? How long have you two been planning this little coup in my own house? The silence that dropped between us was thick enough to cut. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, but she recovered fast, flipping her hair like this was just another Tuesday disagreement. We're not the enemy here. You've been so stressed. This is us stepping up. Sign the papers, we all move forward, and nobody has to lose anything. I stared at the signature line on the last page pen already in her hand, like she expected me to roll over right then and there. Part of me wanted to snatch it and sign, just to see how fast their plan would blow up in their faces. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the one who'd turned a side hustle into a 7-figure operation while everyone else was still figuring out their brand voice. The sarcasm in my head was screaming, but outwardly I stayed measured, calculating every next word like the strategic move it was. I slid the folder back toward her untouched. You know what, you're right. This does need to be formalized, but not today. I need to review everything with my lawyer first. Natalie's been handling all the corporate stuff for years. You remember Natalie, right? The one who actually knows what she's doing with contracts. Vanessa's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Ethan glanced at his phone, then back at me, something uneasy flickering across his face. I filed that away. Later, I'd learn exactly what that look meant, but right then, I just needed them out of my house before I said something I couldn't take back. Claire appeared at my elbow like she'd read my mind. "Ms. Reynolds, your 3 o'clock call is waiting. Should I tell them you'll be a few minutes?" I nodded, grateful for the out. "Yeah, Claire. Tell them I'll be right there." I looked back at Vanessa and Ethan, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. "You two can see yourselves out. We'll talk soon. Promise." They left, but not before Vanessa shot me one last pitying look over her shoulder. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Sophia. We love you. Love." The word almost made me gag as the heavy front door clicked shut behind them. I stood there in the quiet of my kitchen, the lake lapping gently outside the windows, and felt the first real wave of bitter rage settle into something colder, sharper, strategic. I pulled out my phone and texted Natalie Brooks' emergency. "Vanessa and Ethan just tried to claim 40% of the company with old paperwork. Need you here yesterday." Claire lingered, her face pale. "That was intense? Do you want me to pull the original filing records?" I nodded, already moving toward my home office overlooking the water. "Do it. And get Derek Hansen on the line too. He was there for some of those early meetings. If anyone remembers the truth about what Vanessa actually contributed, it's him." What I didn't know yet was that Derek had already overheard something far more damning the night before, something that would change everything. But that piece of the puzzle was still hours away from landing in my lap. Right then, I just sat down at my desk, stared at the rain-streaked windows, and let the sarcasm and bitterness fuel the plan forming in my head. They thought they could walk into my home and steal my life's work with a few signatures and a smile. They had no idea who they were actually dealing with. The rain-streaked windows blurred the lake view into something gray and indistinct, much like the future I was suddenly staring down. I fired off the text to Natalie Brooks and leaned back in my chair, letting the sarcasm and bitterness twist together into something almost useful, like fuel for the machine I was already rebuilding in my head. They thought they could stroll into my Lakeside Manor like it was some casual coffee run and slap those papers down as if I'd just roll over and thank them for the privilege. Cute. Real touching. I pulled up every digital copy of the original incorporation files. I could find my fingers moving with that cold, focused precision I'd honed over 8 years of turning nothing into everything. Claire Montgomery slipped into the office a minute later, her tablet already open to the scanned archives from the early days. She'd been with me for 3 years now, quiet and loyal in a way that made my best friend's betrayal sting even sharper by comparison. I pulled the witness statement transcript from the original filing meeting. She said, keeping her voice low and steady, like she knew I needed facts, not sympathy. Derek Hansen was there that day too. He signed as a character reference for the bank account setup. "Want me to loop him in?" I nodded, the bitterness sharpening my words into something measured but edged. "Do it. And tell him it's urgent." If anyone remembers how little my best friend actually did back then, besides complain about my long hours, it's him. Claire stepped out to make the call, and I sat there staring at the documents again, the old lies exposed in black and white. My best friend had co-signed as a technical founding partner, sure, but only because I was 23 broke and terrified the LLC wouldn't go through without a second name on the credit check. She'd never put in a dime, never touched a single client pitch, never stayed late when the fabric samples arrived at midnight. But there it was, her name right next to mine, waiting like a trap I'd walked into with open arms 8 years ago. My phone buzzed almost immediately, Natalie Brooks calling back. I answered on the first ring, keeping my tone even strategic. "Natalie, you're not going to believe the circus that just walked out of my kitchen." She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm already pulling the state records. Walk me through exactly what they said and what those papers claim." I laid it out for her, every condescending word from my best friend and my boyfriend, the 40% stake they were suddenly entitled to, the operating agreement update they wanted me to sign like it was a mere formality. Natalie listened, then let out a low whistle that told me everything. The cosigner status is real on paper, Sophia, but it was never meant to be permanent equity. We can challenge the interpretation based on the original intent and lack of contribution. There are loopholes here, old lies about her role that never got updated. But this is going to get messy if they push it publicly. Messy. That word landed like another slap. I was still processing it when Claire knocked again and poked her head in. Derek's on the line. He says he has something you need to hear right now, something he overheard last night. I switched the call to speaker so Natalie could listen in. Derek Hansen's voice came through the business associate, who'd been one of my earliest vendors and had stuck around through every expansion. He'd always been straightforward, the kind of guy who showed up with samples at 7 in the morning and never asked for credit. Today his tone was clipped, almost apologetic. Sophia, I hate dropping this on you like this, but I was at that networking event downtown last night, the one for the design collective. I stepped outside for some air and heard your best friend and your boyfriend on a call near the side entrance. They didn't see me, but I caught every word. He paused, and I could picture him rubbing the back of his neck, the way he did when something made him uncomfortable. They were talking about forcing a full buyout. Your boyfriend said he'd been feeding her details from your shared accounts for months, and your best friend laughed about how easy it was going to be once they had majority control. She mentioned something about using the public gossip angle, spreading word in our circles that you've been unstable lately, overwhelmed, maybe even hinting at some fabricated personal issues to pressure clients into backing her instead. Then she said, and I quote, "Once we trigger the crisis clause in the old papers, she'll have no choice but to step aside or watch the whole thing collapse." They were planning to file an emergency motion this week if you didn't sign today. The room went dead quiet except for the distant lap of the lake against the dock outside. Natalie's voice cut in sharp over the speaker. Derek, can you put that in writing? We're going to need a formal witness statement transcript for this. This isn't just a paperwork dispute anymore. This is coordinated fraud. I felt the sarcasm rise like acid in my throat, but I kept it measured, channeling it into the plan instead of exploding. Of course they were. My best friend, always the strategist when it came to taking what wasn't hers. And my boyfriend, Ethan, the man who couldn't even remember to pick up dry cleaning, without a reminder, suddenly has the energy for corporate espionage. How romantic. The bitterness tasted familiar now, almost comforting in its sharpness. I thanked Derek, told him to send the statement through Claire, and ended the call feeling like the ground had shifted under my Lakeside Manor for the second time that day. Claire lingered in the doorway, her face tight with concern. This is escalating fast. A couple of mutual contacts already texted me words starting to spread in the Seattle design scene that there's drama with Lakeview Lux. Something about you being checked out and your best friend stepping up to save the company. It's vague, but it's gaining traction on a few private group chats. Public gossip. Of course. That was the secondary knife twist, the one that would erode my reputation, while they smiled and played the concerned saviors. I laughed short and bitter, the sound echoing off the dark wood beams. Let them talk. Let my best friend spin her little narrative that I'm the unstable one who can't handle success. I built this from the floor of a studio apartment while she was busy chasing trends and complaining about how hard it was to support me. They want consequences. Fine. They're about to get a masterclass in what happens when you try to steal from someone who learned the hard way that trust is a luxury I can't afford anymore. Natalie jumped back in her voice, all business. We have options, Sophia. We can file to dispute the equity claim, immediately freeze any further filings, and use Derek's statement to show intent. But it'll drag into the courts and the gossip will get louder before it dies. Or we play their game smarter, let them think you're cooperating while we build an airtight counter. I stared at the lake, the gray water reflecting back my own calculated calm. The crisis was triggering something deeper now, a full confession in my own mind about how long I'd ignored the red flags. My best friend's constant little digs about my work-life balance. My boyfriend's sudden interest in my financials, disguised as caring. Old lies exposed, and the alliances I thought were solid were crumbling faster than the rain hitting the windows. I chose the strategic path, the one that kept me in control. We play it smart. Set up a meeting with them here tomorrow. I'll listen, I'll nod, and we'll record every word. But Natalie makes sure the witness statement from Derek is ironclad. I want this betrayal documented like the legal landmine it is. Claire nodded and slipped out to handle the arrangements, leaving me alone with the growing weight of it all. My phone buzzed again. My best friend this time, a text that read, "Don't overthink it, babe. We're doing this for us. Sign tonight and let's celebrate like old times." I stared at it, the sarcasm curling my lip into something that wasn't quite a smile. Old times. Right. The kind where I carried everything while she reaped the casual benefits. The public gossip was already spreading little ripples, turning into waves in our tight-knit professional circle. A text from another colleague pinged in, "Heard some wild rumors about you and Vanessa." "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up my own contacts and started quietly reinforcing the ones that still mattered. The clients who knew my work firsthand, the vendors who'd seen me grind through deadlines no one else touched. My best friend and my boyfriend thought they could turn my world upside down with legal papers and whispered calls. They had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead, bitterness sharpening every move into something precise and unforgiving. But as the afternoon light faded over Lake Washington and the manor grew quiet around me, the first cracks of real doubt started to creep in beneath the sarcasm. What if fighting this meant losing more than just the company? What if it meant watching the last scraps of my old support network dissolve completely? I pushed the thought down hard, focusing on the plan. They wanted a crisis. They were about to get one they'd never recover from. Or at least that's what I told myself as I sat there resilient and focused, the emotional undercurrent starting to pull harder than I wanted to admit. The next morning dawned gray and unrelenting over Lake Washington, the kind of Seattle weather that matched the storm already brewing inside my historic Lakeside Manor. I had spent the night reviewing every line of the old incorporation documents with Natalie Brooks on a late video call, my sarcasm a shield, as I muttered about how my best friend had turned a favor from 8 years ago into a full-blown heist. Claire Montgomery had stayed late to organizing the witness statement transcript from Derek Hansen into a crisp folder that now sat on the marble island like a loaded gun. My boyfriend and my best friend were due any minute for the cooperative meeting I had agreed to, thinking they could waltz in and finalize their little takeover. I stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, letting the bitterness simmer into something strategic and cold. They wanted consequences. They were about to learn that the woman they thought they could steamroll had spent years building walls they couldn't even see. They arrived together, of course, pulling up in Ethan's sleek black SUV like they were presenting a united front. Vanessa Hale stepped out first, her designer coat flapping in the lake breeze, that same honeyed smile plastered on her face. Ethan trailed behind, avoiding my eyes the way he had the day before. I greeted them at the door with a measured tone, the sarcasm already lacing every syllable. "Come on in, you two. Make yourselves comfortable in the house I paid for." We wouldn't want to rush this little family business discussion. My best friend breezed past me into the open living area, her eyes sweeping over the dark wood beams and the sweeping water views like she was already calculating her share. "Sophia, babe, you look exhausted. See, this is why we're stepping in. You've been carrying everything alone for too long." My boyfriend nodded along, muttering something about how the company needed fresh leadership. I let them talk, pouring them coffee. They didn't deserve my resilient focus, keeping the bitterness from spilling out too soon. Claire hovered discreetly near the hallway tablet ready, while Natalie waited on speaker in the next room, listening to every word. We settled at the long dining table overlooking the lake, the legal papers from yesterday spread out like a bad joke. My best friend launched right in, sliding the updated operating agreement toward me with that practiced pitying look. "Just sign, Sophia. It formalizes what was always there. We're not cutting you out. We're protecting the brand from your burnout. The gossip's already starting in our circles, you know. People are saying you've been distant, unreliable lately. We can spin it as us helping if you cooperate. The public gossip. It had escalated overnight, just like Derek warned. A few texts from mutual clients had already come in that morning, vague questions about whether I was stepping back. I felt the sharp jab of it, but I kept my voice steady, strategic. Gossip, huh? Funny how that happens right after you two start whispering on phone calls at networking events. I slid Derek's witness statement transcript across the table, watching their faces. Read it. Out loud if you don't mind. Derek Hansen overheard the whole thing last night. The planning the crisis clause you wanted to trigger, the part about spreading rumors that I'm unstable. It's all here in black and white. Ethan's face went pale. My best friend snatched the paper, scanning it fast, her smile cracking for the first time. This is ridiculous. Derek's just loyal to you because you throw him contracts. It's hearsay. I leaned back, the sarcasm dripping now. Hearsay. That's cute coming from the woman who co-signed as a founding partner while contributing exactly $0 and 0 hours. You complained about my schedule for years, Vanessa. You rolled your eyes every time I canceled plans for deadlines. And now suddenly, you're the savior. My boyfriend feeding you account details behind my back. How long has this been cooking exactly? The room tensed. Claire stepped forward quietly and placed her tablet on the table, hitting play on an audio file. The twist landed like a hammer. Actually, she said, her voice calm but firm. Derek wasn't the only one who caught it. I had a feeling after yesterday, so I asked a mutual contact at the event to discreetly record the rest of that call when they stepped away. The full audio is right here. Every word about forcing you out, using the old papers, and letting the gossip do the dirty work. I sent it to Natalie last night as insurance. She's on the line now. Natalie's voice crackled through the speaker. We have it all, Sophia. This is coordinated intent, fraudulent misrepresentation of equity. We can bury them in court if it comes to that. The recording played my best friend's voice clear as day, laughing about how easy it would be once the crisis hit Ethan, chiming in about the shared accounts he'd been monitoring. The crisis triggered everything. My best friend's face crumpled first. She slammed the tablet down, the confession spilling out in a rush of defensive anger and tears. Fine. You want the truth? I helped you file that LLC because I thought you'd fail and I'd get something out of it eventually. You were always the one who got everything, the clients, the manor, the success, while I scraped by on side gigs. Ethan and I talked about it for months. The papers were old lies, yeah, but they were legal. We deserved a piece after pretending to support you all those years. The gossip was just to speed things up. You were never going to share willingly. My boyfriend looked sick, muttering that it had gotten out of hand, but the damage was done. The full confession hung in the air, raw and ugly, exposing every old lie and every calculated move. The public gossip had already cost me 2 major clients that morning, word spreading faster than I could contain it in our tight Seattle design circle. Alliances I had counted on for years started fraying in real-time texts, coming in from former supporters who suddenly didn't want to get involved. I felt the sarcasm crack, then the bitterness giving way to something deeper. My voice broke as I stood up, the emotional weight finally hitting like a wave against the dock outside. You two were my people, my best friend since we were broke and dreaming, my boyfriend who I let into every part of my life. And you plotted this in my own home using legal papers. I trusted you with turning my success into your golden ticket while spreading lies that I'm falling apart. Tears stung my eyes, hot and angry, the breakdown raw in front of them for the first time. I didn't scream, but the hurt poured out in shaky, bitter words. I built this empire alone while you both cheered from the sidelines and resented every win. Now you've poisoned the one thing I had left: my reputation, my network. Congratulations. The painful choice came next. Natalie advised fighting it all the way, but dragging it through courts would mean months of headlines, more gossip, and potential damage to the brand I had poured 8 years into. I could win on paper, but the cost would be everything I had rebuilt after the initial shock. In that moment, staring at the lake through blurred vision, I chose the boundary that hurt. I offered them a minimal settlement, enough to make them go away, without admitting fault, dissolving the fake equity claim, and forcing them out of any involvement. It meant losing some immediate cash flow and watching old professional alliances drift permanently as the gossip lingered. My best friend and my boyfriend took it defeated and silent, but the victory felt hollow. They left the manor without another word, the heavy door closing behind them like a final severance. Claire and Natalie stayed to handle the paperwork, but I walked out alone to the private dock after they were gone, the emotional breakdown fully hitting in the quiet. I sat on the weathered wood, the lake lapping cold and steady, and let the sobs come ugly, shaking things that stripped away the sarcasm and left only the raw pain of losing my best friend, my boyfriend, and the support network I thought was real. Everything I had leaned on was gone now, permanently severed by their greed and my choice to protect what remained of me. Old lies, exposed alliances, lost the manor suddenly feeling too big and too empty. But as the tears slowed and the gray sky began to clear in patches, something shifted. A subtle, defiant peace settled in quiet and unshakable. I had chosen myself over loyalty that was never real. The company was still mine, protected, resilient, focused on the clients who knew the truth. The gossip would fade. The network that mattered would rebuild or it wouldn't, but I wouldn't trade my peace for it again. Self-respect wasn't loud or triumphant. It was this, sitting by the water, I had earned boundaries, drawn like steel around the life I had built alone. Peace required strong boundaries, and self-love meant letting go of the people who only ever saw me as a resource. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked back inside the manor, the weight lighter somehow. They had taken what they could, but I kept what mattered most, me. That cold fallout lingered for weeks, the old support network evaporating as mutual contacts picked sides or simply disappeared. My best friend and my boyfriend faded into radio silence, their attempt at a takeover reduced to a cautionary tale in our circles. I focused on the work, the manner, and the quiet strength that came from finally choosing myself. It wasn't the victory I once imagined, but it was mine earned through the painful choice to walk away from the fight that would have destroyed more than it saved. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated, share your own boundary moment in the comments below. What was the hardest line you ever had to draw, and how did it change everything?